few years, it's mainly been used as a sports ground. You've got all the football pitches, Sunday football a lot here, and you've got the Irish football over there, and you see a lot of people playing golf recently as well. And you've got people that just come here to collect the fruits. People talking about making blackberry jam, rosehip jam. It's a use for everything. And we're so lucky to have it here, surrounded by all of these buildings, and it's massive. And I always feel for the prisoners over there in Wormwood Scrubs, everybody is in a hexagon so they can all have green space to look at. It's got one of the biggest chapels, I think, in any prison ever. And it was built by a real reformer saying, let's not punish prisoners, let's try and reform them. And I think that was part of putting it on this land so they'd always have green space to look at. In one respect, they're locked up, but their view is so beautiful. I wonder how it makes them feel. Hello? It's always been a common land since going back to the 6th century. The Bishop Mellitus was sent over, but he got chased off by the pagans. But it's always been a common land. It's never been built on. That's why it's special. It's real ancient London history here. But more and more now, it's kind of being crept up upon. So obviously, this is big scrubs. Across the road is little scrubs, and they used to be joined, but they've put a road through that. And then they put the train tracks on this side, and obviously they're building on that side. There's the Linford Christie Stadium over there that's, I think it's Queen's Park Rangers have got designs on to take it over and to expand it massively to their football stadium. So it's always being slightly encroached upon, but there's always a really big kick back against it. So I'm grateful for that. Pre-lockdown, this place, as you see it now, is virtually empty, pretty much any time of the day. You get a lot of dog walkers in the morning and the afternoon, but that's it. At lockdown, it just exploded. There wasn't a 10-metre patch that people weren't sitting on, having picnics. It became really busy. And I think a lot of people didn't know that it was here. I don't think people really realised that Scrubs was this nice. It's like a haven for me personally, and I'm sure it is for a lot of people as well who don't have gardens or any kind of green space to come here and just be surrounded by this. And it doesn't look much, you've got much more beautiful landscapes, but it is special. You've still got the peace and tranquility here. People have become to appreciate their health more than their wealth, because that's what's actually going to get you through a traumatic experience, fearful for your health. And coming to green spaces is integral to looking after yourself physically and your mental health as well. The impact of just looking at green boosts our mood, it boosts our serotonin and our dopamine. It has a positive mental impact, which will then turn into a positive physical impact. During lockdown, telling people that they couldn't spend more than 2 hours outside and they had to wear face masks. And I understand why that's being said, because it's a fearful approach, but actually spending time outside is going to lower our stress hormones. Breathing in the microbiome which is around us is having a positive impact on our immune system. So when we're told that we can't spend more than 2 hours outside, it's really going to be diminishing all of those aspects of our health. And even the vitamin D that we're getting now is such an important and underrepresented and misunderstood vitamin and hormone that's having an effect on our mental health, cardiovascular health, immune. And this is how we get it. This is the best way to get it, exposing our body to sunlight. Having the sun on our skin is it's one of the biggest health benefits that we can give ourselves for free.
With the lockdown here, it's been great because we can social distance and we can still have our classes and exercise. But it's fresh air, you don't need to worry about masks and all these kind of things. Without this place, to be honest, I'll probably be indoors driving myself a bit mad. It's a traditional martial art from Malaysia and Indonesia. So it's something I've been training from like my teenage years. It's good not just for learning self-defense and so on, just for people's fitness, and also for learning stuff like breathing, calmness and all these kind of things, yeah.
The travellers have been there for years and years and years. The way they're treated is, it's disgusting really. The Irish travellers around here, they've been allocated a piece of land underneath the flyover. So the flyover is massive and it meets like this in several different places, and they're right in the junction where all the roads meet over each other. So the amount of pollution that's just coming down and hitting them on a daily basis has got to be impacting their health tremendously. And travellers only got human rights per se in the last decade. They were granted human rights as travellers. Obviously there's all the blackberries, but they're being trimmed back quite a lot, and the rose hips. So they're all really, really old traditional medicines that are very safe. So rose hips. So there was a big boost during World War II for people to go and collect these and make syrups. Berries and hips and haws like this normally come out at the end of summer, early autumn, because that's when we're going to start getting the sort of autumn, winter illnesses. So this is a big immune boosting herb and plant. And they taste really nice as well. And it's kind of like working with nature intrinsically. All the plants that we need to come up at a certain time do, because we need them for those health patterns. We've co-evolved with plants, so they've learnt to grow with us, and we've learnt when to pick them and when to use them safely. It's beautiful. So yeah, vitamin C, you can come and get it for free, and it's such an easy syrup to make. And it's funny around here, because this is obviously wormwood scrub, so wormwood is a plant, and old oak common is at the top as well. So many places around here are just to do with plants, their place names, which is such a nice homage to how people would have seen it living there when they were named. Most of my childhood memories have been around being in nature. It's kind of just something that's always really appealed to me. My granddad, a lovely Irish man who knew every single herb and plant that we walked past, and he might have had a different name, but he always knew what it was good for. So it's just always been part of me. It's what's excited me the most. It's such a cliche, but I've always wanted to help people, and I thought about becoming a doctor or a nurse or something like that, but there was always something that didn't feel quite genuine. So I thought about becoming a herbalist, a medical herbalist. So they use a lot of principles that conventional medicine does, but instead of using pharmaceuticals, which are very refined, cut off from human condition kind of medicine, and they work tremendously well in some cases. But herbal medicine works in a much more subtle way, and we use the whole herb in a lot of our practices. So that's combining all of the constituents of one herb, whereas conventional medicine extracts a constituent that they know has this property and will have this impact on the human being. And like I've said before, we've co-evolved with plants. We have an integral relationship with them that a lot of people have become blind to. And I just want people to kind of say, oh, this is around me, rather than just saying, there's a tree line. Okay, well, what tree is that? What does it do? What's its story? What's its narrative? My mum's from a Scottish travelling tradition called Tinkers, Highland Travellers, and they're very specific to the Highlands of Scotland. And as such, their culture has been unchanged for centuries. So I'm really lucky that I've gained the knowledge of centuries of oral tradition from them about plants and about their surroundings and what's good for us and what's not. Yeah, I think it's part of my DNA. I'm just really lucky that I've got a tradition that hasn't been fractured in a sense. Medical herbalism is the practice of using plants for health beneficial reasons. It's very science-based. All the herbs that we use, the majority of them have had clinical trials, which proves their efficacy. It's finding what works in nature and applying it to people. Western herbal medicine as a tradition has been fractured, whereas a lot of other traditions like Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, African traditional medicine, Native American medicine, these have all had really long lines of unbroken practice. But Western herbal medicine, so European predominantly, has been fractured because of the witch trial craze, because anybody that could use plants or know their benefits and their properties was considered a lot of the time as working with the devil. It's that aspect of us placing ourselves above nature again and looking down upon it and not having an integral relationship. But I do think the tide is changing on the view of herbal medicine, slowly but surely, in this country at least, because if you go to China or India, that it's a given. Well, of course it works, that's why we use it. It's integrated within their hospitals. HS2 is, in my opinion, pretty awful. I know that it's going to be creating a lot of jobs locally, and I know that their aim is for it to be carbon neutral, but that's in 100 years. That's a few lifetimes for people to have this massive impact upon them. They're also planning to take over a corner of the top of Scrubs for one of their entrances, and it means that Greenward Scrubs won't be seen as a nature haven. It will just be seen as an entrance and an exit to an extremely busy train station. And I think people going to use a train station are not looking around them and saying, wow, this is beautiful, I want to spend time here. They're just going from point A to point B. People that live in cities just need to hold strong and say, no, we need to have this. This is part of our human condition. We need to have nature around us. We need to have spaces like this for us to gather. And I would like that message to go out more. Let's not just let them cut down our trees or take over our green spaces. This is this is for the common people. This is where we've all come for years to gather. So hopefully long may it continue.
The tours with talking and exploring, we not only do we visit different industries, different places, but during each walk we look at the green areas. This is much more than just meeting for walks. It's a vessel to meet people from completely different backgrounds, walks of life. This way we create real community, and that's why originally, when I set up the group, the Ealing, Walking, Talking and Exploring group, the kind of main angle of it was for the people, the English speakers and the non-English speakers to meet, to bring us together, to learn about each other, from each other.
Well, you've been doing walks
Much
for years.
Yes, for years.
And you started coming from Poland with whole groups of people showing them places. But
And also
more
doing
recently, it's been West London. You know about the history of the place
Yes,
as well.
I explore the history.
You bring that in, you
Yes.
bring about the changes. And people also in the group, some of them have got great local knowledge, they contribute as well.
Yes. On my bicycle, I look into every possible corner and take pictures of these places and think, even if it's kind of weed, but at least it's something, to rest your eyes on in all these industries. And if somebody took care of it, it could make some nice spot. There are so many hardworking people in all these factories there. I've noticed it myself, dropping litter, etc. is kind of normal because it's not looked after anyway. Why would I care? While I think if the care was taken of these areas, maybe some more even grass or some wildflowers, that could make a big change. So the green area provided by Harold Wesley, who established his stationery works here. He looked after his employees, so at least they have some nice resting place here and some places for activities. This plant, it kind of catches you. Before it flowers, actually this can be eaten, it can be used in salads or in soups. They let the grass flower to sustain pollinators, all sorts of insects and bees, etc. So it's amazing that so many plants that people knew how to use, either for medicine or for culinary purposes, we forgot about it. It's now the skill that we get more interested in and explore it.
The central part of the area is very narrow roads servicing buildings full of lorries and white vans, not at all pedestrian friendly. And to try and bring some greenery into that is a real challenge. But it would help those who are working there and who are maybe going to live there as well.
So
you need a community in the area to do
is
that.
also someone who needs to get involved, who need to observe it. But with Park Royal, the fact is that most of the people there are comers and goers, those who come to work. They need to be perceived more as members of community rather than just this workforce. The smaller businesses that operate on more community level, they look after the people who work for them. Kamil comes from Shaidan in Lebanon, and he came well over 30 years ago. He established his business initially in North Acton, just off North Acton Business Centre in School Road. School Road because there used to be lovely school there, but that was demolished. He also had to move the area along with other businesses from there when HS2 started their building. He has always been very popular. He's well established because of the quality of his food. I like the fact that he looks after his staff. Also to his customers, he's very welcoming.
I think HS2 has had a huge effect. I mean, because there are whole areas that have been bulldozed, and then it's going to take years until that particular area becomes available. HS2 was concerned to show people what was happening, but I don't think they were seeking people's views in terms of having any effect on what was going to be there.
For me, things of heritage value are important to preserve. So the Castle Pub is, or now you can say was, an iconic place because this was the hub for all the BBC. There was the costume factory, the rehearsal rooms, lots of action was happening and lots of, all these people would meet there for lunches or in the evening. So it had all this history, and on my walks many local people share memories, anecdotes, rubbing shoulders with these famous people. Oh, here is this one family I was telling you about. On my previous walks in the past, I saw that the swans were nesting by the feeder. When the little ones are bigger, then they come on the canal and get used to being more mature. We approached the canal from the Israeli road, and I can see that the access path has been looked after. They cleaned the footpath and the grass is looked after. So I can see some kind of positive change, I would say.
People who were wedded to their computers and wedded to their office places have now experienced the release of getting out there. So
talking and exploring inspires them to kind of take a fresh look at the places, even this walk around the block, that they can take a different turn every time and kind of see something that, or walk somewhere they wouldn't think of walking, because everywhere is something to discover. This way of looking at places has always been the way I look at the world. Maybe it's because I kind of never felt really at home in my own hometown. So for me, it was always looking at places with an interest and with trying kind of to understand the community at grassroots levels. We can create this better environment for us all to coexist. And I'm delighted that Antoni understood it and joined me.
My motivation from a long time ago has been to try and help make this place feel like home for people who've arrived here often through very distressing journeys.
We provide for the people this space of connectivity, of togetherness, which is so important for mental health reasons.
It's accepting people.
Yes, and it's accepting people as they are.
Well.
Yes.
My boat cost about the same as the house I sold in Texas to pay for it. Before you take off every morning, the first thing you do is you check your weed hatch. Okay, there's one bag, potato chip bag, actually some weeds. Weeds is always, it's nice when you can just pull weeds out of your weed hatch. Some people dump, mattresses and furniture along the canal to avoid, paying the tip fees. In the year since David Posnett created the Friends of the Grand Union Canal, which started during lockdown, and he's now got 3,800 members, and today's the first time that anybody, to my knowledge, has done a Paddington arm-length cleanup, 13 miles. My sense is there's less debris in the water, and I've done less defouling of my propeller than a year ago. So I have to credit Friends of the Grand Union Canal for that.
There's volunteers across different patches, the idea being that we clean up the green space and prevent the rubbish from going into the canal and protecting it both for the people and the environment. I found it on Facebook, I joined, and it's just groups of people, I guess, that are like-minded and want to look after both the canal and the green spaces. I think people have become more aware of what's around them during lockdown, because when you've got nothing else to do, you go and look for somewhere to walk, and that's certainly been the case for me.
And the idea was to create something that could be disassembled and assembled very quickly using sustainable materials for any of the performing arts or anyone who wants to hold an event. You'd have these underneath storage compartments that would be able to pull out on both sides, and when pulled out, you can obviously put whatever you need to go in, or you could use it as an extension to the current stage with one of the pre-existing walls which used to exist on an old shed. So they'd literally just slide on top and very simply just connect them to produce an extension. This space could be both permanent and a temporary space due to the way it was built. Growing up somewhere that wasn't always the safest it used to be, but with small developments in communities, by bringing different communities together, it does help bring a much safer place, a much happier place for people to visit.
It's really important for me to have kind of a space for them to kind of get out and play, because the further we go into London, the less and less it's going to become. There's just going to be a concrete towpath with roads and stuff like that, so it's going to kind of restrict them from being able to enjoy the outside space. And even for us, I love having a bit of space to sit on the grass and just chill out. But me and my sister will go cycling, and you'll see the HS2 line come in. They destroy the greenery to do it, and any of the debris, it usually gets chucked into the river. There is a lot of people out there screaming for help, and they're standing together as a team, and I've seen some success, but most of it's going downhill, I think. The actual people I've met along the river are amazing. Like coming from housing, it's just so much better. We've met so many nice people that just helped out, for nothing, and then you do the same. You help them out for nothing.
Came all the way from Greenward, and it's a nice straight path. It's just 7 miles long. So I'm going to go Paddington now for the Freedom March. Well, I wouldn't like to see all the beer cans, etc., especially in the morning.
To me, looking Greenward means seeing more greener spaces and, treating it with more respect. Green spaces for me is just great for my mental health as well. I feel more at peace and calm. I always look out for it. Like wherever I go, whichever part of the city, I always look out for it.
So I'm doing my dissertation at the moment. It's on environmental justice, assessing accessibility to urban green space amongst members of the Black community in Brent and the impact of the pandemic. There's 3 things that have kind of come out of it that I've been surprised by. The first one was kind of lack of investment, and that relates obviously to everyday issues, littering and stuff. But it also relates to cuts to youth services as well. So the green spaces were identified using spatial mapping software, so GIS. A lot of previous research using GIS just focuses on publicly accessible. So in that sense, things like cemeteries and sports grounds are removed because they've got conditions, temporal and fiscal conditions attached to them, which again is a constraint in its own right because people go out and access lots of different green spaces and navigate their way through these spaces in different ways. But that was my starting point in terms of identifying the green spaces. Your green space might be very close to you, but if it's of poor quality, if there's antisocial behaviour, if you literally just don't have the time because you're working 2 jobs to afford to live there, then you might not be able to access it, and I think that's really important. Getting children familiar with these green spaces as well, so that they know the benefits, they know the physical and mental health benefits, and that they're familiar and begin to see themselves represented in these spaces. The first woman I spoke to, she lives down on the border of Queen's Park and Kilburn. Queen's Park is obviously a very affluent area, and Kilburn is quite high in terms of levels of deprivation. And she was saying that she just wouldn't go into the park at Queen's Park anymore. She just doesn't feel like it's a space that she belongs in. So Queen's Park High Street itself, there aren't any black shops on the high street, they don't hire black staff. It's a very kind of white yummy mummy clientele, and she just said, I don't really feel like I belong in that space, and that's kind of stopped her using that. This kind of wave of gentrification, you know, starting in Notting Hill up through Ladbroke Grove, jumping on the heels of Harlesden, I think, as well. And there's a lot of previous research to do with environmental gentrification, so that's the creation of new green spaces and the associated rise in housing costs, and that can kind of intentionally or unintentionally lead to a displacement of lower income residents. But there's not a lot of research that considers, you know, what happens when the green space is already there and the gentrification happens around it. You know, that impacts the kind of closest spaces that people live to. So in a way, it's kind of this subtle changing of who has access to what space physically, but then also this kind of creation of a mental barrier as well. It wasn't until probably last year, in the kind of Black Lives Matter movement, I really kind of started looking inwards and kind of challenging the kind of structures that I, you know, benefited from. So I knew going on from that I kind of wanted to focus on this idea of environmental justice, especially in light of the pandemic. You know, I think that's kind of highlighted a lot of green space inequalities. It's reflected in morbidity and mortality rates as well. There's a lot of statistics that came out of it. Black people are 4 times more likely than white people to lack green space at home. Racism is kind of embedded in all of our institutional structures, and just by looking at socioeconomic deprivation kind of ignores the kind of racial undertones of green space access. Green spaces are essentially an extension of the public realm. So what happens in the public realm and what happens in society is going to be reflected in the green spaces.
I want to produce food for other people and they produce food for me, and it will look good how Brexit is like stopping like our food incomes, and soon people are gonna have to start growing food for themselves.
When you eat something nutritious and healthy, it gives a better lifestyle. I've been helping my mum and dad with the farming at home as well. We have a garden, and it has helped a lot with the foods as well as what we eat at home, because mum cooks a lot of the stuff.
The growing process is very long. There's a pear one that dropped 2 pears. The one from the tree is much more sweeter than the one from the supermarket.
So I started like growing stuff when I was around 7 years old, and my grandma's garden, like me and my granddad will go like put seeds in.
Contributing to the environment is a big benefit, even if it's just a small thing. Starting off with the recycling, going up into like planting trees, or even that fruit that you just ate. What do you do with the seed? Research a little thing about it.
The green spaces creates happier, healthier human beings. I feel like it allows you to reflect on what you have been doing and what you could be doing. It allows you to give time to yourself.
The green area that I remember was near Wembley Stadium. It used to be just green, and then they kind of like blocked it off for everyone to go there. And then they cut the trees down and started using it to build houses. You think that the housing are for the homeless, but then it's just for rich people to come in and live there.
Boring. There would be nowhere to meet up or nothing like that. I wouldn't really have like nowhere to go.
1 minute you're enjoying yourself out, the next thing you know you're being stopped by the police and you're thinking like, what have I done? It feels like to them you're threatening, but you're not. You're just like trying to keep it cool. So just to engage with other authorities, engaging those older than us, it's really helpful because it's going to connect us together in a way that we didn't realize. At the end of the day, we're all human and we're all doing our part in order to stop certain things from escalating.
A lot of people take advantage of all the green spaces we have and use it for like pollution and things that it shouldn't be used for. And maybe that could intimidate the rest of the community, the rest of the environment.
Seeing a lot more people going to the park, as well as like having a good time outside rather than staying inside, because there's a lot to see in the world. And I think just people need to see that so they have more knowledge of what is out there.
I love going to parks. I like walking a lot. I like fresh air. I don't like being in the house too much.
My mum used to bring me to the park, and that's when I learned how to like ride my bike and stuff. And she taught me to ride a bike, and I used to ride my scooter with my brother.
Looking at green kind of makes me relax and calm, feels like I'm in a safe place.
I want to produce food for other people and they produce food for me. I want people to have food, like so they start farming.